Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Subtext Mastery class. This is very exciting because subtext can make such a difference, both in the quality of the read of your script, but just as important, or maybe more important, in the way people in this industry respond to you. When you can deliver powerful subtext all the way through your script, people are going to see you as a pro. And by the way, this is one of those skill sets that a lot of times I think, it's not being explained in a way that makes it simple and easy to do. And today, our job is to make sure you have absolute clarity. Now, before we jump into this, let me just say a few things so people know. Please keep your pictures on so I can see you. I'm looking at my machine, but behind me are two screens. Each of them have 50 different people up there. So I want to be able to see your face so that we can communicate directly. Second, about halfway through, I'll open it for questions. And at that point, for those of you who have specific questions that will help you understand subtext, I'm happy to do that. And then at the end, we'll also open it again for questions. Now, my advice to you as you are going through this program is to do two things. Keep two pads of paper or two pieces of paper, whichever you want. One is going to be, here is what I'm learning about subtext, and here's the notes I'm writing. We're going to move kind of fast because we have a lot to cover in the next 4 hours. So just take notes as we go. Don't worry if you miss something. I'll put these recordings up for everyone to see afterwards. So I think they'll be up on Monday or something like that. So that'll give you time to digest it, then you can watch it again. Second pad of paper, I'd like you to just put at the top the title of the current script you're working on. And then that one's just going to be ideas that pop into your mind as we go that you can improve on that script. For the moment, the most important of those two pads is the one that you are taking notes on, because the more you get and the more you understand this, the more successful you'll be. Also, one of the things we'll try to do if we have time is put you guys in breakout rooms from time to time where you can practice and work together and interact about it and get a chance to see how other people are thinking and that kind of thing. But to start with, let's just go to the next step. So I want you to think about magic tricks for a moment. You're an audience member. If you've ever gone to a magic show, and there on the stage is this incredible magician. He or she is doing magic. You're trying to follow them, and you get surprised again. And next thing you know, oh my God, you're walking out and going, how did they do that? That's the way subtext was presented to me early on. It was something magical that nobody could understand. When I first started in this, I had already written 5 screenplays and I was taking all of these classes. And so I went up to each teacher at the end. I made the mistake on the first one. I asked her in front of the whole group, how do you write subtext? And she got angry at me. What I did out of that was I thought, okay, I'll just ask them privately. So I went up to each teacher afterwards and I said, how do you write subtext? Because I'd been told it was really important. And they would say things like this. They would say, well, it just emerges. And I was like, how do you get it to emerge? And they'd say, well, the more you know your character, the more subtext will come out. And I'd say, okay, but is there a specific way to write it? It's like, if I know my character well, but people are saying there's not subtext in my story, what does that mean? And they would give me some vague answer. And I would say, well, how do you know when there's good subtext? And they would say things like, I know it when I see it, right? Back to the magic trick. It's miraculous, it's mysterious. They only know it when they see it, but they can't tell you how it's done. So what we realized out of this was, to the magician, it's mechanical. And this is incredibly important. You need to let subtext be mechanical for you. I've had people before who they would tell me, oh, I can't figure out the subtext on this. And in about 3 minutes, I would help them brainstorm some new subtext. And then they would see how it is. And then they go, oh yeah, but that's not right. That doesn't fit. It's not right. And when we got down to it, what wasn't right was that it didn't seem miraculous how they created it, right? It was like, oh, that does work. Yes, this character has this layer up here and this layer here and this layer here now, but it wasn't miraculous. It didn't fit that. It didn't give them the spectator's wonder. Now, listen, if you talk to magicians, you will find out every single thing they do is mechanical, right? All the rest is performance. They act like they are amazed by what they just saw, but they're not. What they're there for is to give the audience a particular experience. And subtext is the same. Our job isn't to be like in wonder of how we just created that subtext. Our job is to understand, look, here's a layer, here's a layer, here's a layer. I'm going to uncover this layer at this point. And then I'll uncover that layer at this other point. It's mechanical, right? Now, by the way, you'll still love your writing. It'll just be built in a way that the audience will have that wonder. And people will say things to you like, oh my God, you're an incredible writer. How do you write subtext? And you'll say, it just emerges. Because you know what? Any other explanation that you give to an audience member or even a producer is going to take too much effort. And it's actually going to reduce the experience that they had. So our job is to be the magician. Our job is to be the magician and have our audience love the experience they have. We're not the audience. We are not the producer. We are not the director. We're the magician who can write things that all those other people don't even understand how they happen. Now, what that's going to do, and this is the sad part of the story, is that is going to have you not having the same exact feeling. You won't be quite as in wonder about your story. However, once you understand this, you will understand how people have multiple layers of experience as they go through watching your movie or your TV series. So for this first part, and this is today, here's what we're going to go through today. First, we're going to go through the basics of subtext. You got to get that. That's, surprisingly enough, 20 years ago, those screenwriting teachers couldn't even explain to me the basics of subtext. It's incredibly important. Once you learn it, then everything else will make sense. Second, then we're going to talk about how to build subtext at each level of your story. We'll go through some explanations, some examples, and then I will give you questions that you can use to discover subtext. And this is important. I think a lot of people think, they really honor that story that you hear in the media or you hear from A-list screenwriters of the story just popped into my mind and then it just unfolded. It was this miraculous experience where the Lord spoke to me and suddenly I saw all. I've interviewed 100 A-list screenwriters. I've talked with so many of them who will tell me, they'll say, yeah, the story just popped into my mind and it unfolded. And I'm like, okay, cool. So you were walking along the beach that day. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was 75 degrees. You felt great. This story pops into your mind and it just unfolded. So tell me what that means. And then they'll tell me, well, I saw the structure. I saw the characters. I kind of knew what was going on with it. And I'm like, okay. And was that in a single step? Or did that happen over 10 steps? Right now, I know this sounds obnoxious, but I'm trying to get this. And they'll say, well, I think I was walking for about a half an hour that day. And I'm like, okay, cool. So multiple things came to you that day while you were walking. Now, I can already see some people squirming here, but please know this. When you hear that story, that's not exactly how it happened. Because then I start saying, okay, so in the midst of that, did you start thinking about, and I start naming things off. Did you start thinking about how you're going to pitch this? And they'll go, yeah, I was starting to already see the pitch. And it's like, all right. And how long did you think about that? And they'll say, I don't know, the next couple of weeks. And I'm like, all right, okay, how about the lead characters? When did you discover that this lead character, this wonderful woman that you have as your lead, is actually a vampire? When did you discover that? And then the person will say, well, first I thought of them as a victim, and I was seeing them as one of the people that was going to be killed. And how do you save her? And then all of a sudden I realized in this one scene that she's actually one of them, right? And it's like, okay, and when did that come to you? Oh, a couple of days later. Now, why I'm telling you this is this. First, I want you to get over that thing of thinking that all of it has to come to you at once, otherwise it doesn't count. Second, what I want you to know up front is what comes to you immediately and you see the whole story, that's your first draft. Because this is the other part. A lot of times when something comes to people and they see the whole story, then they write exactly what that is. And now they've got a surface story with nothing underneath. So back to this. I'm talking with this one A-list writer, and I said, after that came to you, right? Would you go back and type it up? And he says, yeah. He says, I typed up a whole bunch of notes. And I said, all right. And did you realize there was things that were missing? And he says, oh, of course. He says, I had about a page and a half of notes, different ideas. I felt like I knew the structure and that kind of thing. But yeah, there was a lot missing. And I said, okay, how did you start to discover who those characters were beneath the surface? And now they start talking about the different techniques they use to do that. They start talking about the different questions that they were asking, right? They start talking about how they went on the search. So that's the other part. Please know, looking at this iceberg here, there's a lot beneath that surface, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But there's a lot beneath that surface, and your job is to discover it. And so we're going to give you some tools for that. Now, part 2 of this program, and this was something that I just added right before we even told you guys about it. I thought, I don't just want people learning these skills. I want you to actually apply them to your script so you become a master. I want to see your movies, right? I want to see your TV shows. I want you to have that experience of people loving how you write. I want you to be winning contests. I want you to have producers in awe of who you are as a writer. So we need to immediately apply it. And here I'm going to ask everybody for a show of hands. Here's my question. When you get the part 2 lessons, and those are just going to be really simple, they're going to be on each level of this subtext model. I'm going to ask you to go to your script and immediately brainstorm and implement some changes. Now you'll get those like every 3 days over the next 10 days or so. Here's my question. How many of you promise that you will do that if it will double the quality of your writing? Can I see your hands? All right, good. Okay. 95% of you. All right. I think a couple of people, somebody has a broken arm, so they couldn't raise their hand. They were nodding though. So I'll go with that. Okay. So that's what this will be about. And now let's talk about surface versus under the surface, because this is where really this starts the basics. This brings us to the game you're going to play. I had a lady who wrote a script. She did 10 drafts on it. She did well in contests. She'd gotten up to a finalist level. The contest gave her some feedback and said, the lead character doesn't have any subtext. The writer came to me. She was trying to get it into producers. And she said, I know that you have a class on subtext, but I really feel that this lead character has subtext. All I have to do is to be able to explain it to them. So I read the first 10 pages and that lead character had no subtext. That character was 100% on the surface. Everything about her, she either said or did. It was 100% right at the top there. It was the part that sticks out up above. And I said, no, you actually don't have any subtext. We'll need to find that. Now, let's just pause for a second. In her world, she had subtext. And here's her subtext. And this is what I want you to get, because this is really important. The reader picks up her script. When I picked it up and started reading, I saw the name of her lead character. And if we pause right there, it's on the first page. I saw the name of her lead character. I only know two things. I know first, the lead character is a female based on the name. And I know what the name is. Now, I want you to get this. What does she know? Because here's what she knows. The writer knows this. She knows everything about that character. She has 15 pages of backstory written on that character. She knows the entire journey that character is going to go on. She knows the lines of dialogue that character is going to say. She knows how the story ends, right? She knows every step of what's about to happen. She even knows things that she left out in the last 10 drafts. Right? In her world, the moment she sees that name, she has this huge experience that she's calling subtext. And that's what the problem was. The problem wasn't that she wasn't a good writer. The problem was she was experiencing a whole bunch of subtext, but she had not let us start to have that experience. We're going to be looking later on at a clip, the one from Warrior. If you remember the very first scene of Warrior, those two characters are talking. There's a lot of subtext that's present in that scene. There's a lot of experience that we're having that's not showing up in the room, right? When the guy says, when what's his name, Tommy says to his dad, is that from the 12 steps? Or do they give guys like you 24 steps? My guess is you got kind of an experience of Tommy's life and what he grew up with, because he's saying that this one particular alcoholic is twice as bad as any of the others out there, right? There's a whole bunch of lines in there that start to unfold experience for us. And this is what I did with that writer was I said, okay, tell me, I'm reading this first page. Tell me your experience of this character. Okay, good. Now, how can we get some of that on the page without having it be on the nose? And we'll talk about that. So, okay. So there's a surface. There is what's beneath the surface. On the surface, this is the outward appearance. It's the top layer. And here's what I would do. If you haven't spent a lot of time with subtext, I would just assume whatever you've written is the top layer, that there's something underneath that, and you've got to find it. Under the surface is the deeper meaning that the audience will experience. Now, so let's go to this. A lot of times people think their job is to use subtext to trick the audience, right? To have the audience get that moment, like at the end of Sixth Sense, where suddenly we find out the whole time this guy's been dead and we didn't know it, right? And by the way, that works really well if it's set up well. That's called revealing a layer. They did a good job on it, but we're not waiting for that moment to trick the audience. What we need is the audience to constantly be having a deeper experience. You know, I was watching one of the Star Wars movies that Lucas wrote all the dialogue himself. Every character told their subtext. It was probably one of the most, it was the most useless experiences I've ever had sitting in a theater. Every single character, when somebody would ask them what's going on, they would tell the subtext beneath the surface all the way through. And it was like, you know what? Bring in a good writer who knows what they're doing and take that exact same script, have them put 50% of it beneath the surface, have them write in a way that we instantly experience it, but the character didn't say it. Have that happen, and that movie, I think, would have been great. Now, I know there were Star Trek people or Star Wars people who loved it because of the special effects, but from a writing perspective, from a experiencing the characters perspective, that movie sucked. So this is, this is important stuff. It makes a difference. We need to have the audience experiencing something deeper in every single scene. Not just when we get to the very end and we find out, oh my God, he's been dead the whole time. And by the way, if you go read that script is incredibly well written. It has us experience subtext under the surface all the way through. Multiple times. I mean, pretty much in every single scene, there's something under the surface that we're experiencing. And then we get the big, surprise shock of our lives that ultimately is what sold that particular movie. So, and gave M. Night Shyamalan a career. Subtext definitions. I think we already said these. Subtext, the outer appearance, the top layer, right? Or excuse me, surface. Excuse me. Surface is the top layer. Yeah. So it's usually the surface is going to show up in your action and your dialogue when characters are talking about what's going on in that moment, when they are talking about what they're doing, when they're, when we're experiencing that, and it's going to happen a certain period of the time, right? You've got a plot, a story that the audience is completely aware of, and we're going through and experiencing that. There's also something underneath the surface, that deeper meaning that we want them to experience. The objective is to have them have that experience consistently all the way through, right? Again, it's not to hide subtext all the time. The characters will be hiding it, but the audience will be experiencing it. So one other thing, on the nose. This one means the character is actually saying the subtext rather than acting it out. So there really are times where you need it to be on the nose. Let's say we've gone through 2 or 3 scenes that were very, very emotional. And by the way, things have changed in those 2 or 3 scenes, and your audience is deeply engaged in what's underneath the surface. You might have a character actually turn to everybody and say, all right, so the ship is sinking, right? Or you might have them predict the future and say, this ship is going to sink. And what that does, that's called anticipatory dialogue. That sets up the need to see what's coming up. Sometimes it's valuable to have characters talk on the nose. Here's the main thing that we need to have here is we need, as writers, to have control of it. And we need to be doing it based on the experience it'll give your audience. Right? So if it's intentional that I'm having a character say something about the future, we're all going to die or something like that. Okay, if that's creating an experience that I need to create, suspense or worry or, seeing the internal state, whatever it is, okay, that's fine. But if that's not really needed, then let's have the character say something else. Let's have the character turn to the person they hate the most and say, I just want you to know I do love you, right? And we get this character thinks that he's about to die and he needed to share this those are kind of like he's saying his last words, right? It's like we have that experience under the surface. We also have the relationship going on. We have this moment where something's revealed, and all because we didn't talk on the nose. Now, does that make sense to everyone? Nod yes if it does. Okay. Is there anybody it doesn't make sense to? Nod this way. Okay. All right. Okay, we're doing good. So, surface versus under the surface. Your surface is going to have both dialogue and action, and you'll get to choose when you have dialogue point to something beneath the surface or when you have action happening beneath the surface. So let's just talk about our layers here, or actually these are the levels of subtext. First one is the plot. And we're going to go through and look at it in detail. But your plot, your plot comes from your concept. Everything else comes from your concept. If you're going to sell a movie, you need to be able to give a pitch, and then the story honors that pitch. But the plot, right, is the series of events that make up this story. There's going to be a certain amount of it that is on the surface. And a lot of times people talk almost entirely plot on the surface. There's also going to be plot that happens under the surface. This plot that happens under the surface is often the most interesting part of it. So we'll go into detail in a few minutes. Then there's character. I put character at the very bottom here because I think character is the basis for most of this stuff, right? Most of what's happening in this story is going to come from character. So the character, though, does need to deliver on the concept. Again, you look at your pitch, how are you selling it? The character needs to come from that. But character, real character, is happening beneath the surface, right? We are learning about these characters as we go. If you watched, like, let's say The Matrix, you watch the opening scene of The Matrix where they introduce Trinity. Nobody stops and tells us who Trinity is, right? Well, what we have is the opening scene. We've got, there's something going on. We've got cops down here. We've got agents who show up. We cut up there. We see that, the cops are about to bust in the door on Trinity. They finally kick that door in. They go in. Now they're all standing around her. They got guns pointed at her, right? Down below, one of the cops says, I sent 2 units, 4 guys, and the agent says, your men are already dead. There's our first indication to who Trinity is, right? Then we cut back up, and now we see Trinity be able to, jump across the walls, kick the living shit out of these guys, and ultimately kill them all in a matter of 30 seconds, doing some incredible work. She gets the call, realizes, the agents are on the way, and she runs off and jumps from one building to the other. Now let's pause. What I want you to see is this. Trinity, nobody said who she was. Nobody said, oh, this lady, she can kick people's asses. And by the way, she can fly from one building to the other. Nobody said any of that. We just experienced it all under the surface. And we experienced it through character, through a little bit of dialogue. We'll see what that means in just a moment, and these other parts. We also experienced it through the environment, right? It was a weird environment where she's hiding out in a room with a phone. What does that mean? Why is that so important? There's something going on with that. Why are they calling her and she, giving her instructions? Who is that person, right? There's things happening beneath this surface that we're having to ingest. Then there's a situation, which is the cops are after her. They're kicking the door in. The agents are down below already knowing that those cops are going to be killed, right? It's like, how do they know that? So again, this is even the situation is a tough situation, but it's a challenging situation, but it's also a subtext situation. There are things happening in this situation that point to a deeper way of understanding this world and who these characters are. Then we have the action, right? And if Trinity would have just turned around and done standard karate stuff and just punched them and kicked them and that kind of thing, it would have been one thing. But the moment that Trinity runs up the wall and across the wall before flying over and kicking these people, that moment, didn't you automatically think, oh my God, there's something else going on here? Right? There's something deeper. So there's an action on the surface. Yes, she's fighting. There's an action beneath the surface of, and she's running up the walls. That means something is going on under the surface. And then finally, the dialogue. If you go to the cops, when the cops said, I sent 2 units up, that's dialogue that's on the surface. He is saying exactly what is happening. I sent 2 units up there, right? Totally fine. The agent says, your men are already dead. That's dialogue beneath the surface. There's a meaning there, right? First, the agent doesn't say it like, this is my prediction. He says it like, it's already happened, which now has us go, somehow this character all the way down here, this agent knows what just happened, right? Second, what does that mean that he could know that they're already dead? What does that mean? There's something there, right? There's some meaning beneath the surface. So why I'm telling you all of this is this. I want you to just notice the difference. The dialogue and action on the surface. There's a lot of action on the surface. Car pulls up, agents get out, the cops are talking. She's in there answering the phone. There's stuff that we know is real and we know what's happening. There's also all of this action and dialogue beneath the surface that gives a different meaning to what is going on in that moment. That's what we're looking for here. By the way, I just want to check, show of hands. If you were watching The Matrix and you watched that opening scene, let's say you went to the theater, you heard wonderful things about this, and you watched that opening scene, but let me tell you the opening scene in a different way, and I just want to see what you think. If the opening scene was, the agents arrive, they have a little argument with the cops, then they say, no, we have jurisdiction, we're going to go up there and arrest her. They go arrest her, and they take her away. How many people would have thought that was a great opening scene? Please raise your hand. Nobody. Yeah. That's the scene that's on the surface. That's the scene that most people write. This is what they did here, the Wachowski siblings. What they did was incredible from a subtext perspective, and how they delivered their world was incredible because they delivered it primarily through subtext. Okay. So now the question is, how does a writer discover the deeper meaning? Here's the first part. Assume it's there. This is, in my opinion, this is one of the primary reasons why most people don't have great subtext, is they pretend it's not there. They'll tell me over and over. I've had a producer comes back, a producer says to the writer, this story needs more depth. And the writer comes to me and says, but it's got enough depth. It's already good enough. And now they're telling me all the reasons it's already good enough. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, tell me your pitch. And they tell it to me and I say, oh, hang on. That's pretty cool. You're talking at this level. And then does this happen? And I talk about a layer beneath the surface. And they'll go, no, that doesn't happen. No, that's not the story. You got it all wrong. And it's like, wow, they can't even look beneath the surface. Now, why? Because first, they're experiencing so much subtext from having written 10 drafts that to them, they're already getting the experience. but the producer didn't get it and the audience won't get it, right? So our job first is to assume it's there. So whatever you've written right now, here's my question. Whatever you've written right now, would you be willing to assume that there is something deeper that you will discover in your story? How many people would be willing to do that? If you can, raise your hands. Okay, good. All right, 95%. Excellent. Okay. Oh, sorry. The others just raised their hand. Okay, cool. All right. So you're going to assume there's something deeper, right? So then your job is to search for it, to start looking for it. Now, back to the writer that I was just talking about. And I've actually had about 20 of these experiences, but a particular one, I said, well, wait a minute, there's got to be something beneath the surface. The producer is asking you for something beneath the surface. And he said, the producer didn't give me any notes. And I said, no, wait. He said, you need more depth. And he's like, that's not a note. That doesn't mean anything. Now, to him, it didn't. To me, it meant there was a subtext problem. Most likely, there were probably a couple of other problems that we could explore separately from that. But the job now was first assume it was there. That's what I did. And then start searching for it. We brainstormed for about 10 minutes. I asked a bunch of subtext questions. And then we tried on multiple versions of it until we had a fit. It took about 5 minutes for me to get buy-in from that writer to assume that there was something there. But once he got into it and started brainstorming with me, then it became a whole different thing. We found at least 10 different ways that we could put subtext beneath the surface. Some of them were for a different story. Some of them actually didn't fit, and that's okay, right? This isn't a thing where you have to get the perfect answer first. The truth of the matter is sometimes you get it, after 10 tries or 15 or 20 tries. I talked with one professional who his movie had just shown up on the screen. I was interviewing him in front of an audience. And I said, I love your concept, man. That's an amazing concept. Those characters are incredible. How long did it take you to figure that out? And he said, I wrote 4 drafts and the concept was just this. And I was like, okay, when did you get this other part, the subtext part that everyone loved? And he said, I had to walk around after the 4th draft. I walked around in it for 2 weeks asking questions. And one day I had a breakthrough. And he said, that's what the whole thing ended up being about. Now, again, when he's walking around for 2 weeks, he's assuming that it's there. He's searching for it. He's actually asking subtext questions, even though I don't know which ones he was asking, but he's searching for it. So he's asking the questions and he's trying on different versions of it until he finally finds one. So that's what we're going to do. Now, this one other thing. I want to clear up one myth. Subtext does not make a character a bad person. A lot of times I've actually had people say to me, I'll go, what's the subtext of this character? And they'll say, she doesn't have subtext. She's nice. And it's like, oh, she's so nice. She's nice. But that means that she has no inner world. She has nothing going on under the surface. That means she's one-dimensional. Are you really trying to sell something where a character is just nice? And by the way, if you identify your characters as nice, likely they're going to shock the living shit out of you when you find out who they really are. So let's go back to this. I just want you to know this. Every character has subtext. Every character. Even the nice ones. Think about how many times have you heard stories on the news about a minister who had some serious shit going on. My dad was a minister, by the way, so I have the legal right to talk about them. But I remember Jimmy Swaggart getting caught in a hotel with a prostitute and getting up on television and saying, I have sinned, right? It's like, he might be a nice guy. He represents something having to do with, religion and those kinds of things, but he's got stuff going on under the surface. So I just want to go to this example. Let's take a character who her whole purpose is to give her boyfriend a surprise birthday party. So what's about to happen is this. First, there's going to be a conspiracy. We're going to have multiple characters conspire against one in order to create an amazing night, right? They're conspiring. Are they bad people? Second, there's deception. The birthday person is deceived into thinking nothing is happening. Third, there's dialogue. Everyone is lying to that person. Fourth, there's a subtext environment. They're taking him to the one place that he would never suspect that's where he's going to get surprised, right? He has to work again that night. He has to do something else. They're going to take him to the place that he didn't want to go to, whatever it is. Yeah, the whole purpose again is to make this work. And then there's a covert scheme. They are luring that birthday person into an unexpected environment. Now, looking at this, now we have the big surprise. Everybody's happy. People are drinking. They're having fun. It's after COVID, so they get to hug each other, right? So that's important. But all of this had a good intention. It has a good reason to be happening. All the deception, everything else was about trying to actually make this person happy. That's wild. So why I'm saying all of this is, even if you have nice characters, they have subtext. And by the way, let's just be clear. If you have a nice character, possibly they're the worst person in your story. As in, they're the most evil. You might want to, especially if you bought into it. If you have completely bought in that this character is nice, she or he couldn't possibly have subtext. They couldn't possibly have something going on the surface. It's like, wow, if they have tricked you that badly, think of what they could be doing to the other characters. So just be careful about that. Now, but by the way, there's another thing that could go on. You could have a character that's nice. And by the way, they're in such a bad spot that they have to do bad things. You could have a character that is nice and they're having all kinds of emotional turmoil going on inside. We could have a character that's nice and they have multiple personalities, and some of those personalities aren't very nice, right? You could have a character that's nice and still have incredible subtext if you're willing to build that in. So that's where you want to be. You do not want to have characters that are nice and that's all there is about them. They have 4 nice traits and they have everything else is nice. That character should not be in your script. So just a thought. Okay, where's the deeper meaning? And by the way, I know that we're going through a lot, but these are the subtext basics. You'll get a chance to go watch this again. Most important on this is just stay with me, just go through the journey and keep thinking about this as we go. The deeper meaning could show up in a lot of different places and in a lot of different ways. So the reason why I'm saying I want to tell you this is because I want you to know it's not just you go evil, right? Or it's not just, oh, they're automatically lying. The deeper meaning, this is just one of a bunch of them, it could be hidden, right? And it could be hidden intentionally or unintentionally. Like if you look at Born Identity, the deeper meaning was hidden from the character, not intentionally. Nobody did that to him. They didn't think that he was going to live, right? They shot him a couple of times, left him out in the ocean. They weren't trying to have him get amnesia. They wanted to kill him. So in that case, the deeper meaning was hidden unintentionally. There are lots of other ways that happens, but let's keep going. The deeper meaning could show up in a covert scheme or deception or, a conspiracy or something like that, right? So that's another way. The deeper meaning could be a layer, could be a story underneath the story, could be something that's a new reveal that changes the meaning of everything that's come before it. Like if you look at The Sixth Sense, you get to the end, that's the deeper meaning, right? It's a layer that was present the entire time to the writer. And finally, the writer let us see it. But the writer went back and did, once he discovered it, M. Night Shyamalan discovered that deeper meaning after the 9th draft. He was on the 10th draft when he discovered it. And then he went back and he created the setups and rewrote 2 scenes. He wrote 1 new scene and a couple of others in order to build that in. The deeper meaning could be in backstory. But here, listen, I want you to be really careful about backstory. If you've written 15 pages of backstory for your lead characters, that means you have hundreds of pieces of information about them. And it may be that only a couple of them actually matter, right? If you look at the movie that one of the ones we just watched, Warrior, there's deeper meaning showing up all the way through that has to do with backstory, but it only points to a couple of things. It points to an abusive past, right? It points to the dad being an alcoholic and being the abuser. It points to the things that happened to the mother, and it points to these 2 brothers got separated, and one of them is incredibly angry about it. And then the last thing that it points to is, this, Tommy was a war hero who went AWOL, right? You know what? We don't find out 10,000 other things that are in that backstory. So I'll just give you one tip. Sometimes a producer says, tell me the backstory. They only want those key elements that are going to have a major impact on your script. So be careful. Don't tell them everything that happened with a character. Just a thought. Now, here's something that could surprise some people. Deeper meaning could show up in the future story, right? If you know something is going to happen with this character in the future, you're looking at a character who, let's pretend this, you're looking at a character who's been kidnapped and is being held in this room, and this character someday is going to be the president of the United States. And that what happens in that room is the point where they make the decision or where they have the change of life that makes them something amazing. You're going to be writing out of that future deeper meaning, right? So sometimes that happens in this situation. Part of Warrior is writing out of that future. The future is these 2 brothers are going to be the last 2 standing, and they're going to fight it out in that ring, right? That future existed for the writer from the beginning they started writing the story. There are multiple times in there where they set up for that future, where things are happening beneath the surface that prepare us for that. And then there is known subtext. Known subtext means we as the audience already know, right? There is a previous or present subtext that the audience has experienced or they're experiencing simultaneously, and we know it's happening. I'll talk about this a little later, but when you look at the movie Failure to Launch, it's like she tells us her 5 steps up front, and then we watch her do each one of them. Every time she's doing one of them, we know the plan, we know the step, we know why she's doing it, and we know she's been hired, right? It's all known subtext. It's all present in those scenes. We've got it, right? So The thing often that I think sometimes people think of subtext as it always has to be something the audience doesn't know, and it always has to surprise them and those kinds of things. That is one thing you can do. But the truth is you can play so much with known subtext and have the audience get a deeper experience because one character knows what's going on and the other doesn't, right? So it still makes it dramatic and interesting. Okay. Now, when is the subtext revealed? And I hope this isn't overwhelming you guys, but let's just keep going here. There's three places. The subtext could be revealed before the actual scene. So if you have something that's going to be happening in this scene, if you reveal it beforehand, and if you show the audience that this is the bad guy, these two are going to go out on a date, and by the way, this guy is the bad guy. This guy's whole purpose is to kidnap or do whatever, I don't know. And we show that person doing something really bad, whatever it is. Now, when they're on the date, we are in superior position. So we are sitting there going, oh my God, don't go with him. Don't do it. Don't kiss him. Oh no. It's like the whole time we're experiencing the subtext of what he did in the previous scene playing out in this one, right? So that is a great way to use subtext. You also could reveal it during the scene. So we have a moment in the scene, right? We experience that subtext layer. We experience the surface layer and the subtext layer simultaneously, as in, and you'll see in just a second when we talk about this. But if we're experiencing both layers at the same time and something new is being revealed halfway through the scene, and now we have the rest of it, this is during the scene. And then the other way is to reveal it afterwards. Like if you look back at The Sixth Sense, that was a reveal that happened after, right? Once that reveal happened, we went back in our mind and rethought that whole story. It's like, wait a minute, there was never a moment where any other character talked to him, right? The kid was afraid of him the first time he saw him. He ran into a church hoping that the bad spirit couldn't come in. Right? There was all kinds of things that we suddenly learned afterwards and went back and replayed them in our mind. So this is an important thing to be able to play with. And let's just go to this scene so you can see it here, or this one. When is subtext revealed? Failure to launch. Paula tells the parents, we'll have to learn how to spell parents here, that she simulates a guy falling in love, right? She tells the parents, they hire her for this. So later on, that's before it's already revealed, right? She gives us her 5 steps. Then we watch those steps play out one at a time. We already know everything she's doing. And yet it's all subtext because he doesn't know it, and we're watching it happen to somebody who is unaware. So we are getting to experience watching her go through those. Now, they did a really smart thing because all of those 5 steps basically worked, and then the whole thing backfired. So, it still ended up being an interesting story. So we get to watch every one of those steps happen in the scene from a superior position. Does that make sense, everyone? Nod yes if it does. Yes, good, thank you. Okay, during, if you go to the celebration dinner, and we'll look at this in more detail later, but the celebration dinner where he brings over Paula and the parents to announce that, well, I'll just go through the announcement in a minute. But during that celebration dinner, that's happening in the moment, right? The subtext is being revealed in the moment, and we will get a chance to take a look at that one in detail. And then after, when is the subtext revealed? Afterwards. If you go to the end of the movie, there's a point where Trip talks with his 2 friends All three of them throughout the whole movie have had this one thing in common. They all live at home with their parents, take advantage of that situation, and they have a life where they can do anything they want. When we get to the end, it turns out that one of those friends actually owns the house, and he moved his parents in to take care of the parents. So he has actually the opposite experience, but the reason that he's doing it is to take care of Trip, because Trip has this wound. Trip's previous girlfriend died, which is why he has these issues, right? But we're finding this out after it all happens, and now we're rethinking who this friend is. It's like, wow, what a nice guy. So the meaning, he's been pretending to be like Trip to help him get over the loss of the woman that had died. So, okay. Now let's look at this first one. Don't worry, we'll do a quick assignment here in a couple of minutes, and then we'll go on a break. But let's just go through this. So concept / plot. The concept is the big idea of your story. Usually this, if you only have, like if you're making a phone call to a producer, you'll just say the title, the genre, and the concept, right? If you're in an elevator kind of situation, right, where you're doing your elevator pitch, you just ran into them and they ask you, what are you working on? Again, this is what you're going to say. It needs to be a hook. It needs to be interesting. We'll do that in another class. But I just wanted you to get that. It should be one sentence that basically describes the whole story. The plot is the series of events in the story that deliver the concept. So when you think about plot, you're thinking about all the events that start from the very first scene all the way to the very end. What are the events that deliver that story, right? This is pretty easy, but now we're going to add subtext. Each of them has deeper meaning. Now, let me tell you what I mean by this. Again, if we go to The Sixth Sense, the surface meaning is a psychiatrist is helping a kid who sees dead people. That's the surface meaning. And that's the plot, basically, right? That's the concept, but I mean, we could lay it out as a plot and say all the things he does and that kind of thing. The under the surface meaning is, but actually the psychiatrist is one of them, one of the dead people, and the kid is helping him pass over. Now notice, it's presented in a way, and I think that's the next thing here. Let's just see. Yes, here it is. It's presented in a way, and here's two different formats for it. They're really easy. Whatever your surface is, that's the blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 not knowing that, da, 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 da. So the psychiatrist is helping the kid pass over, not knowing that he's one of the dead people that the kid sees, and the kid is helping him pass over. Or you could do it the other way. The psychiatrist is trying to help the kid deal with these dead people he's seeing, but what's really going on is the kid is helping the psychiatrist because he's one of the dead people. You see that? Now, what I'm doing there, this one part, the not knowing that, but what really is really going on, that one thing gives immediately us that next layer down, right? It gives us what's beneath the surface. What most people tell me when I ask them their story is they tell me the blah, blah, blah part. My story is about a psychiatrist who is having this really difficult time helping this kid because the kid sees dead people, and the psychiatrist has this issue because he dealt with a client who who had the same problem, and he didn't help him. So now he's trying to deal with this, and they tell all the blah, 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 and they leave out what's under the surface, either because of one of two things. Either because they're trying to hide it and they're thinking if they tell it, then it'll ruin the story. But if you're pitching a producer, you know what? You need to tell them what makes this thing multi-layered. Or number two, and this is the more likely, it's not there. right? When M. Night Shyamalan wrote that script, 9 drafts was just blah, blah, blah. Now, by the way, it was good writing. It really was. But what he said after the 9th draft, he realized that all he had was a B-level movie and that it would never make his career. And so he started searching specifically for what was that thing that's under the surface that even eluded me for 9 drafts. You guys see that? If you don't have this, if you don't have the not knowing that as a major part of your story, you now have a huge opportunity. It took M. Night Shyamalan, it took him from being a writer who had, he was a writer-director who had made 3 low-budget movies that no one ever heard of. He had lost money on all of them. He was worried that he was never going to be able to get funds again. And it took him from that, this one thing, this one thing, took him from that to him suddenly becoming one of the top directors in this industry, to him being able to make hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on all the other movies he made, because on one of them, he came up with an incredible concept. So you need subtext built in all the way through. Now, by the way, there are movies that don't have this and they've been made. And sometimes they've got good stories, they've got good things going on, they're okay. If you don't have subtext on a concept level, it just makes it kind of harder to pitch. And it means you're going to have to do other things. You're going to have to go out and get better attachments. You're going to have to go get funding. You're going to have to find a director who will say yes in order to even get it considered. If you have something like this, you've got probably 3 times the chance of success, and maybe more, right? It changed M. Night Shyamalan's entire life. We would have never heard of this guy if he would have just made a story about a psychiatrist trying to help a kid. Never. He would have gone on and made another B-level movie and then another one and another one. So just this can change things for you. And it's incredibly easy to do. You just have to start, you have to go, okay, my story, the way I have it, is at a surface level. Now let me look beneath the surface. What's there? Okay. Warrior. And by the way, I don't think Warrior did a great job of doing this. And it's probably part of the reason that it barely made its money back. But we've got 2 brothers. This is the basic thing. 2 brothers from an abusive family must fight each other in a winner-take-all $5 million MMA competition, right? That's the blah, blah, blah. Now, the plot subtext on this, and by the way, once again, I'm going to say Warrior didn't do a great job on concept. They've got a concept that I think is fairly average. And again, that's probably, my guess is most of you never saw it before. Let me just check. How many people in here never watched Warrior before we talked about it? Can I see your hands? Yeah, it's like, there's probably 3 people in the room that have watched it before. When I first, one of the people in our development team asked us to watch it, and I was like, no, we don't need to watch that. It took her a month to talk me into it. It's a really well-written movie. I like how it was done, but it didn't have, from a pitch perspective, it just never sounded like something that would work. Okay, plot subtext. Tommy has come home from war to see his dad and brother, but what's really going on is he's there to take revenge on them for abandoning him. He's also gone AWOL. Now, if you look at this story, I'm going to say this is Tommy's story. We are watching Tommy go on his transformational journey, right? He starts at one side where he just hates his family, and now he's going to go through so many obstacles on the way to ultimately feeling like he loves his family again. So anyway, okay. So there is a little bit of subtext when it comes to this. I think the majority of the subtext is happening at a different level, but I just wanted to show you that. Here, this one, Failure to Launch, is a very subtext-oriented movie. We gave you different versions. So we actually gave you what, 5, 6 different, 6 different genres. I wanted you to see some completely different ones. This one has a very commercialized kind of subtext. A 30-something guy starts dating a woman that fits well for him, not knowing that his parents hired her to pretend to be his girlfriend and coax him out of the nest. Now, when you watch the movie, by the way, you watch it kind of from a more superior position kind of situation, right? We do see she and him getting along and interacting before we find out what she's done, what she's really doing. But for the most part, most of that movie, we already know they're trying to trick him. They're trying to get him out. But that's the way you write the concept, right? You put in that not knowing that, and then you give us the next layer down. Plot subtext. The parents are conspiring with Paula to trick Trip into moving out, but halfway through, both Paula and Trip fall in love with each other. You'll notice words in here that fit the subtext. They're conspiring. They're going to trick Trip. That's what that whole thing is about. And then they've got this other twist in the plot, which is Paula is actually going to go against everything she holds as her rules, and she falls in love. So that's just 2 examples so you can see ways to do that. So I want you to just do a quick 5-minute assignment. Here's what it is. I want you to write down what's the surface of your story, as in the surface of your plot, right? And then what is beneath that surface that changes the meaning. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do that. Starting right now. Write that down. If you need to take a break right now and go to the bathroom, go ahead. That's totally fine. But just make sure you write this down. What's the surface? What's the pitch that you would tell that's the surface of the plot? And then what's but then it turns out X is happening, or not knowing that, blah, blah, blah. What is that? And if there isn't anything there, then start brainstorming it and just come up with some ideas. We're going to share that with a group here in just a moment, as in I'll put you in rooms of 3, and just so you guys get a chance to hear what other people have, and you get to express what you have and see how it works. So you've got 4 minutes and 15 seconds. I will see you back here in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. By the way, don't turn off your, don't hang up. Don't, just stay with us. 1 minute. Okay, in just a minute, I will we'll put you in breakout rooms. So you'll be working with 2 other people. This will give you a chance to both present yours and then hear theirs. So you get to hear different ways. My advice to you would be participate. Don't worry about being perfect. Don't worry about knowing everything about this. Just participate. And here I want to give you an example so you can see it. If we were doing no way out, it might look like, and I'm going to give you a surface and 3 subtexts so you could see, you could say it any of these 3 ways. If you remember that movie, Tom Farrell is tasked with investigating the murder of the senator's mistress. And there's a few things that we need to know about that. So the subtext could be, you could go straight to, and the senator is sabotaging the investigation to cover himself for the murder, right? But that's pretty much still kind of surface level. So the other 2 subtexts on this, the other 2 main ones are Farrell is having to hide that he was having an affair with the woman. And at the very end, we find out that Farrell is actually the Russian spy, Yuri. So this whole investigation was set up to look for Yuri to cover the senator. And it turns out that Tom Farrell is Yuri, right? So you could say the surface, and then really any one of those or 2 or whatever, as long as what you're doing is giving us what's beneath that surface. So we'll send you into breakout rooms. We're ready, Cheryl? Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So you're again here in the breakout room. Here's what you have. You have 2 minutes each. So we're going to give you 6 minutes. Please, if you find yourself talking for more than 2 minutes, that means you've gone into backstory or you're trying to tell us details or something like that. What I want you to do is just get really, really clear on this if you can. And again, just simply tell whatever it is and learn from it. If you're, if you feel like your pitch wasn't real strong, don't worry about it. That means now it's going to be, your unconscious is going to be processing it. And sometime this week, you'll end up with an incredible pitch. So have fun. Here we go. Ready? I'll see you guys in 6 minutes. Yeah, Friday. So, yeah, but she didn't have control of it. That's part of the problem. For some reason, we have some people who didn't choose to go in. Oh, they didn't accept it.